Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another Chaos Zero Nightmare video. This is Mr.Squarrel, as always. Glad to have you here. So if anyone is wondering, why do you have 10 featured summons in your gift box, the Director's Apology compensation, I want to explain where this is coming from and what to expect from these this compensation that they're talking about. So recently, the devs of Smilegate had a live stream where they apologized for some of the issues, not plaguing, but that are, emerging in their game, in the release that just came out earlier this week or last week, and as well as talking about some of the future updates for this game. And I wanted to talk through a little bit of what these updates are as we kind of look at this compensation. So one of the big things, the reason you're getting the 10 summons, and you will be getting 10 summons each week for the entire month of November, is because of the instability and server issues that have been I hate using the word plaguing, but that have been emerging throughout the game. They have identified where the critical bugs are coming from, and the problems are pertaining to failures in processing payments and item delivery, duplicate rewards from logins, issues with language translations, the necessity of numerous hotfixes, as well as numerous issues related to Prism module observations. And the team do commit to, fixing these issues moving forward, and to compensate and, apologize. They're giving you 10 summons each week in November. So we're looking at like 40 summons throughout. I think it's almost 40 to 50 summons throughout, which is phenomenal. This is just free summons that you're just getting. Pretty much helping people work their way to pity. The other thing they're talking about, and I have my own take on this, and they're talking a lot about wanting to make changes to the story and the way it's being told, in terms of, like, right now, long story short, characters are, there's numerous relationships and different characters talking with other characters and all these different things, and they want to make more of the focus of the commander, or, like, quote unquote, us as the unnamed protagonist, or we name our characters. And I get where they're coming from. They're talking a lot about issues pertaining to writers leaving and resigning, and then other people having to pick it up, and the story kind of being a little bit of a jumbled mess. And they're really focused on completely overhauling main story chapters 1 through 5. I mean, I can understand where they're coming from with this. I think, I'm someone that's very much about gameplay, so I'll talk a little bit about this, and then we'll finish up with some of the gameplay things that they're also talking about. But I think also stories really need to be for writers. I think, like, people are always, like, think the story should go one way or the other. I think really this is, the writers have the choice of what they want to tell, and it's up to us as the reader, the viewer, to take in that story. I think, there are stances that I agree with in terms of, like, gameplay and monetization that I think players need to be very vocal about, that are important to making the game as healthy as possible and as sustainable as possible. And I think that's incredibly important. But when it comes to story, I'm less so about players, because every game has their story, and I think it's important to acknowledge that story is being written by the writers. Now, granted, in this case, the writers are resigning, and so it's very difficult to, have a cohesive story when you have numerous chefs in the kitchen. But at the same time, I think it's up to them to determine what that story goes, and it's up to us as the listeners or the readers to, take in that information and enjoy it. I'm not the biggest fan of the story in this game, so again, none of this information is super crazy to me, but I think it's also really important to understand that not all feedback is good feedback. And I say this because if you're in any form of media and social media in that regard, and you're interacting with human beings, everyone has a take on everything. Right now, I'm giving my take. I think the writers really should continue the story as is. My fear with this is that they're going to, I don't like saying bend the knee, but when players are complaining, I mean, there's a healthy level of, yes, I'm listening and hearing you, but there is also a healthy level of, this is also how it is. when it comes to story, I think that's a stance they need to take. When it comes to monetization and then maybe balance, then you can also take in more feedback. But at the same time, with balancing the characters, you got to be careful with that one too, because people always have biases. But I'm going to come back to this point. This is more of, I think, a central region. I don't want to get too much into details of it, but I think a specific region of players is complaining. I think they're listening to those players. Again, I'm not the biggest person on the story, so I think that for me, it's important. But I'm more into just, I like seeing what the writers are doing and me as the reader taking in that information. I have not been that. I thought the prologue was good, and then after that, I've just kind of been like, whatever about the story. I'm not the best person to talk to about the story, because I just think it seems cool. I like the aesthetics, but other than that, I'm like, it's okay. I mean, the story doesn't really capture me, to be very frank with you. The first chapter did, and then after that, I was just like, So did that, and I'm again, story is not something that I'm super crazy about, but at the same time, people are going to complain, and I think it's up to them to determine whether or not they want to listen to certain complaints versus others. Again, I do think monetization is something they take very seriously, but at the same time, I also think there are some things in this game that are well monetized, and I think there's other things not well monetized. And I think that's what they're talking about, adjustments to gameplay and monetization. This piece that they are talking about here is that they are going to increase the rate at which we get affinity. So I do agree with this. I think it takes a really long time to get characters ranked up in terms of happiness with how many characters we are, especially when we consider that it's part of the missions. I think it's kind of nice that they're acknowledging this. In terms of monetization, they say that it's cheaper to acquire characters, especially it's less stressful because those characters aren't limited, because once the character is in, they go to the normal banner after they're done, besides a few of the characters, right? So I think I like their model a little more than this model. We have yet to see what they're going to do with other limited and seasonal characters, which are going to be limited, but at the same time, we have yet to see this model play out in long term. So I think overall, this is, right now it seems good. That opinion can change very quickly. There's a lot of things that they're talking about in terms of the story, and they were talking a lot about the story. And one thing I do really appreciate, that another thing they're going to talk about, because in my main game, DC Worlds Collide, they're running this issue, is transparency. I do think, being very transparent with the progress of the game. One thing that I really do appreciate that they're doing right now, and I think it does build hype pretty well, if we go to events and we look right here at the Galactic News, I think this is really cool. They're just kind of like leading into this next new character who we don't know. Might be Yuki. Who knows what it is in the next character. But I really like that they're building up this hype. It is getting us engaged. And I appreciate what they're doing here. So overall, in terms of what they're doing, how they're kind of, I appreciate as they're being very apologetic, but I also think they shouldn't have to take in and they also need to take a stand. So if we go back here, they really should take a stand on what it is. Where is it? This right here. They should take it. Server instability and issues with just, translation too. There's been a lot of translational errors. I'm glad that they're fixing these things, and I do think it's important that they reward players and compensate them for these issues, which they are doing an amazing job of compensation here. I think overall this is phenomenal, and I'm really appreciative that they're compensating players. At the same time, they need to be very careful of just taking all the feedback and saying we're going to change all these things that players want. Players don't always know what they want. Or what they need. Want and need are two very different things. I think, again, when it comes to story, it is the writer's choice of what they should do. Now, again, issues with the writers is that there's been a lot of turnover in the writing department. So that is another issue of, stability with the writing department on their end, and which the main guy was like, it is my fault. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But I think at the same time, it is really important that he or the team, acknowledges the game they want to make too, by acknowledging the story they want to tell, and that's on them to let them tell that story. think it's fine. I like kind of the characters just interacting around us. I feel like then it's more lively, but if they're only talking to us, then it's just kind of like they don't really have a life outside of the character of I don't know. I personally I think it's fine the way it is right now, and I appreciate it. I think it's cool. Again, the story hasn't fully hooked me, but at the same time, it is what it is. But overall, we're just getting free summons, and that's nice. So, yeah, guys. All right, I hope this helps. And as always, remember, failing is just your first attempt at learning.